Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KS USA. Today we're going to talk about how to service your Vantage dropper post. Okay, so some of the basic tools that we're going to need to service KS dropper we'll go over here. If there are additional or specific or specialty tools for your particular model that we're going to go over, we'll discuss those in further detail a little bit later on in the video. So you want to start with a good quality biodegradable degreaser. We tend to like the Simple Green cleaners here. You can dilute them down to whatever ratio you want. They wash away easily, and they're not caustic or damaging. So a good degreaser. For lubrication, we recommend either the KS Post Paste, or if you don't have that available, the Slick Oleum is basically the same formula. It's designed specifically for suspension use, more specifically air oil systems, so it's a really good lubrication to use. We don't recommend using automotive grease because they tend to be a higher viscosity and can cause poor performance of your dropper if you use those. A pair of soft jaws so that you can hold the seat post. The one that we have here happens to have a round clamp hole in it, but if you can't find one of these in your local market, you can also do a V-block, which a lot of times you can get those from Amazon or from a local hardware store, a machine shop supply. Those kind of places have them. And essentially you just need something that you're going to be able to clamp and hold the tube. If you don't have access to that, don't panic. You can also use the bicycle frame to hold the post in place while we unthread the collar. We'll go over that in a little more detail later. Utility knife, we generally will use this just to help us remove the guide bushings. So these are handy to have. If you don't have one, you can do it by using your fingernail, but I'd recommend if you can find a utility knife, definitely grab that. A set of Allen wrenches. So you're going to need from a 6 down to a 1.5 millimeter set. So they can either be a T-handle like this, or you can have one of the little pocket folding ones work great too. But just make sure they're good quality so you don't end up rounding or stripping out any of the bolts. Last would be a strap wrench. And the strap wrench is basically to remove the collar. You'll need these on nearly all models of KS dropper, with the exception of the A12 Integra and the Rage I. So those two will use a little different system that we'll talk about later. But the strap wrench you can get from most hardware stores, and they're generally used for fitting pipes that you don't want to do damage to. So if they're a chrome finish or something, these allow you to grab and turn pipe without damaging the surface. So local hardware stores, and again, this is called a strap wrench. And then we definitely like to use a microfiber towel for cleaning and the internal parts and everything. These work really well with the degreaser. They tend to take all of the debris off of your post. So you can get these through most hardware stores, or if you have a Costco in your area, they do their Kirkland brand of towels that work really well. Okay, so with our Vantage, there are a couple tools that we didn't mention in the earlier tool and supply recommendation. One is adjustable crescent wrench, and then the others are a flathead screwdriver with a small flathead tip and a small pair of needle nose pliers. These two really are only necessary if we're going to remove the cartridge for your servicing. We'll kind of go over that in more detail a little later. Next step that we're going to do is use our soft jaws, and we're going to clamp the post. If you don't have the soft jaws, don't panic. You can clamp the seat post in your frame. You're just going to clamp the bottom half here in the frame and torque that to 5 Newton meters, and then we'll be able to use a strap wrench to loosen the collar up. We're going to do it here with the soft jaws. You can also get V-blocks and do the same job as these soft jaws. The V-blocks are just V-shape instead of rounded in the clamp, so those are easy to find. So we're going to take our crescent wrench and adjust that carefully to fit the flats here on the actuator assembly, and we're going to just break that loose. And then we'll go ahead and thread that on out. Okay. Now, if you're working on your post there at home, You don't need to flip this around. I'm doing this just for the view of the camera so you can see what I'm doing. We're gonna flip that around and we're gonna unscrew the seal collar now. We're gonna use our strap wrench. And we'll just do a couple turns with the strap wrench. If you're taking this apart for the first time for service, there may be some thread lock here and the threads feel a little tight as you unthread them, but that's normal. You'll see when I get this off what I'm talking about. So you can see here there's some thread compound. We just do that in the factory so it locks the thing, and once we torque them, they don't come loose. You don't need to reapply thread lock on it when you do your servicing, but you will notice it's a little harder to take apart the first time. Okay, now our next step is going to be to take the actuator off of the cartridge body. Be really careful, this is alloy, and if you squeeze this too tight, you can crush this tube and damage your cartridge. So what I'd recommend doing would be to catch this just near the edge in the vise. And what I'm trying to do here is catch the cartridge as close to the end as possible, because there's a solid slug in here in the end of the cartridge. So if you tighten against that, it's more stable than if you clamp here in the middle where you could bend or dent that. And then there's a lot less torque here. So instead of trying to clamp here and fiddle with it, we're just gonna go here. We're gonna unscrew that. Now we've got it broken loose. I'll take it out and do it so you can see it. Okay, so you have your actuator. There's also a bottom out bumper on there, so be careful you don't lose that. We'll set that aside. Then you have an actuator push pin. We'll take that out. And I think the push rod's probably gonna stay in there pretty good for you. Just be careful if you're handling this that the push rod doesn't fall out and get lost. So you wanna be careful of that. Next step that we're gonna do is we're gonna slide this out, and you can see the band bushing has already come out, so we want to set that aside. We're going to carefully pull this apart, and you're going to see there's some bushings in here. We're going to set the mass tube aside, and we're going to use our utility knife, and you're going to catch the POM bushings on the top. You probably have a little bit of grease on them, and they may kind of stick to your knife. So just be careful when you're popping these off. You want to make sure that you don't lose them, they don't fall on the ground. Okay, so there's 3 and 3, and the upper one is a POM material. That's kind of an expanding bushing. That actually preloads it so you don't get any side-to-side rattling. And then your lower one is a metallic keyway. Those are just designed in the bottom to take the extra stresses or load. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and slide our bushing and seal head off. What I like to do at this point is use a little bit of that degreaser. We're using Simple Green here, but you can use any biodegradable degreaser and a microfiber towel. Let's wipe everything down and get it all clean. Okay, now at this point, if you've taken your post apart because you have any issue with your cartridge and you're attempting to replace the cartridge, now is the time to do that. If you're not having any issue with it, you don't need to take this apart. You can omit this part of it, but we're gonna go through how to take the cartridge out of the post and replace it, just so you have an idea of how to do that. Okay, so we're gonna first start off with our 3mm Allen, and we're gonna put that in the top here, and you're gonna turn that counterclockwise. And you can see that screw's coming up. You probably don't have to turn it up this far when you're doing it yourself, but I'm gonna raise it up just so you can see a little better while I'm doing it, while you're watching. I take that flathead screwdriver, and you just wanna catch the edge of that snap ring and push it up. Depending on how strong your hands are, you may be able to pop it off by hand, like I did here. If you get it up and you can't grab a hold of it, that's where those little needle nose come in, and you can just grab it and pull it off. Be careful you don't lose that snap ring. And go ahead and set that aside. Now, you'll take that 3mm, and we're gonna thread that the opposite way. So you're going to turn it clockwise. And that's going to unscrew the cartridge. And you set your Allen down and the cartridge will come out. Now, if you're not replacing the cartridge, but you wanted to take it out just to check everything out and clean it, that's a good thing. Go ahead and wipe it all down. Okay. And then if you live in an area that's wet or has a lot of inclement weather, it's a good practice to put a little bit of your suspension lube grease on this shaft, as well as all over the body of the cartridge. So we'll just put a thin coat on there. This is going to inhibit rust. It's going to wick away water or moisture. If you're putting a new cartridge in, it's not a bad idea to do this same procedure. It definitely helps keep things lubed up and prevents rust. So check inside the tube. If you see water, moisture, anything in there, you can take the microfiber and the end of one of your tools and push the microfiber in, twist it around, pull it out. You can look down inside, use the light to see, make sure there's no debris or any water in there. If you want to, if you live in really wet conditions, you can put a little bit of grease inside here as well. Then we're going to go ahead and slide the cartridge in. The threaded end of the cartridge goes towards the tube. So we'll put that in and we're going to start. You can turn it by hand at first till you get it kind of started, and then go ahead and take your 3mm and we're going to turn that counterclockwise. And again, I'm going to braze it up a little higher than normal just so you can see in the video. And we'll take our snap ring, and it's small, so it's a little hard to see, but what I want you to think about is put one end of it, there's an opening like this, it's kind of a C channel. Put one end of the opening into the groove first, then use your hand to kind of walk it around, okay? And you'll feel it snap into place. And once it's in place in that groove that's on the top of the cartridge, it should spin around freely, but be captured there. It shouldn't be able to move, okay? And then go ahead and turn this clockwise back down a few turns. And you'll have to just reset this once we put everything back together. But that's it for putting the cartridge in. We'll set that aside for a moment. Now we're going to take a little bit of our degreaser, take our seal head assembly. We're going to clean everything out of the cavity in the seal there. And we're going to wipe the bushing down really good. Okay, now we're going to take some grease. And what we're going to do is fill the cavity inside there. So there's two wiper seals. You fill the cavity in between those with grease. The importance of that is it's going to pre-lube the system every time that it cycles, and it also creates a water barrier so you don't have water getting down through and damaging or taking away the lubrication in the inside of your post. So we're going to go ahead and slide that seal on. Next step we want to do is set that aside. We're just going to clean all of our bushings, and what's important to look for on these is make sure that they're cylindrical, that you don't have any flat spots worn in them, and that they're in good shape, no corrosion. Same thing with your POM bushings. Just make sure that they're clean and not damaged. If they are damaged or worn out, you can get these from your local bike shop. If they're not worn or don't show any signs of damage, go ahead and reuse them. One trick that I will share with you, if you just put the bushing in dry, the bushing can fall back out like that. So when you go to reassemble this and you're kind of got multiple steps going on, it's the worst time for these to fall out on the ground or whatever. So I just use a little bit of grease and put in that groove. Then we put our metallic bushing in first. It goes to the bottom. Then our POM bushing. Once you get those in, you can also take a little dollop of grease and grease the outside of them. And do the same thing. And we're going to do this 3 times. There's 3 bushings in this. Okay. So we're going to set this aside now, somewhere clean. And we're going to take our mass tube and we're going to clean that. So again, a little degreaser, On the microfiber towel, we can use our end of our tool handle to push it in. Kind of twist it around, pull it out. Now you can check inside. I like to kind of hold it up to the light and look into it and make sure that there's no debris inside. If it all looks clean, you're in good shape. I would take a little bit of grease and go ahead and smear that around on the inside of the tube. Now I'm going to show you a little trick on keeping these bushings in. We did the first trick of putting some grease on them so they don't just drop out. But then if you put your middle finger on one, index finger on one, and your thumb on one, and I put it right in between where the plastic and the metal bushing sit, that holds those in place. Now go ahead and put your mass tube on, and you'll want to rotate it until you feel it drop in. Like that. Okay, and so I just let my finger slide down the bushings. I don't ever let go of the bushings, and they go right in. If you let go of it and the bushing pops out and you force it, you can damage those bushings. So be really careful when you do that. Next thing we're going to do is put this band bushing in. So that just sits in a groove around the top of this tube. What I like to do on this is I take my utility knife and I don't put the cutting edge towards the bushing, but I just use that and just kind of tap it down into place. Don't try to use the seal collar to push it in place. What'll happen is if it gets misaligned at all and you tighten it down, you're going to wad up that bushing and it's going to be no good. You're going to have to replace it. So make sure you seat it first, then put your collar in. And I just do this hand tight, and then with our rag with degreaser on it, I clean this collar really good, and we'll talk about why you're doing that in just a minute. Okay, now go ahead and push this all the way out. Our next step is going to be to put a little dollop of grease on the push rod. And that does two things. It's going to lubricate it in the future, but it's also going to help hold it in place. We're going to take our actuator. Oh, and by the way, when you put this push rod in, make sure you put the rounded kind of bullet shape end sticking out towards the actuator. It rides on a lever arm inside there, and we want that rounded edge to ride. That makes it function properly. Okay, we're going to take this and we're going to thread it down. And this part's important. When you get that down to where it's hand tight, again, we're going to clamp it in the vise very gently and as close to the end of the cartridge as possible. And I'm literally, it's just like barely hand tight here. And then take your adjustable wrench. We're not going to use it this way to tighten. We're going to slip it onto the actuator, and you're going to turn it this much. That's it. So that's tight. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and push it back through. We're going to thread this back on. And it's got a little grease on it, so we're going to just wipe it down and get it clean. Now we take our soft block, or soft jaws. Okay, now we're going to use a little bit more torque here to tighten this down. So don't tighten it from here. You can damage this or break it. You just want to adjust your wrench to fit the two flats here. And so it's hand tight now. We're just giving it a little tug. That's all you need. It doesn't need to be exceedingly tight, just slightly over hand tight. And then I'm going to flip this around for you to see. If you're doing this at home, you don't have to flip it. We're going to use our strap wrench. Now, when I cleaned this with the degreaser earlier, that was an important step. You don't want any grease on here when you use this wrench, because if this gets greased up, it doesn't grip and it won't do its job, and you have a really hard time getting the grease off the rubber strap. So cleaning it first is really important. Okay, so that's hand tight. That's it. We're just giving it a little snug down, and that's good enough. Okay, so then the last thing we're going to do is if you know what travel you had your post set at earlier, you can just use your Allen wrench and you can dial it back into your travel. Then the post is going to be ready to put back on the bike. If you want to test this before you put it in the bike, here's how I recommend to do it. You flip the post upside down. You can use your Allen wrench and slide through here to actuate this. Now it's important not to angle this when you're pulling on it. You will break the actuator. It's really important that I like to put my thumb on top and it's just really important that you pull straight up and not on an angle. So I put my thumb on it and I grab like this, and you can see I'm pulling straight up. I'm not pulling the thing on an angle. So you can pull up, cycle it through a few times. You can hear good top out. It has good action, so we're good to go there. Last thing would be when you get this ready to put on your saddle on the bike, it's a good time to put a little bit of anti-seize compound or a little bit of waterproof grease on the assembly. Go ahead and reassemble your clamps. Torque these to spec. Torques are on the head, and make sure you torque them evenly. And yeah, so that's it. You're ready to go.